Let's Talk Books, the official podcast of BookExpo America, BEA. On this episode, we talk with Barbara Berger, executive editor at Sterling Publishing. So Barbara, could you tell us a little bit about what you do here at Sterling Publishing?
Well, I've been at Sterling Publishing since 2005. I'm the executive editor of Sterling, which covers a wide range of books from history to fine art to photography to parenting to cooking to body, mind, and spirit to self-help. And, of course, coloring books is one of the large categories that we focus on, which is under the Lark brand in print.
What has been going on with this coloring book movement? I mean, how are you introduced to it, and how have you been dealing with it here in your position?
Well, I started noticing back as long ago as 2013 that coloring books seemed to be selling very well. I saw this as a trend that was starting, and by the time we jumped into it with Millie Murata, it's just become more and more of an enormous trend for adults. And I think that people have embraced this trend in such a big way because our lives have become more digital and technological, and coloring is a way to break from being constantly plugged in digitally.
You have a creative background, am I correct on that?
Yes, that's right. I'm a fine artist. I'm a painter. I've had a few shows, and I still paint every week at the Selma Gundy Club, one of the oldest arts clubs in the city.
What do you think it is, though, with people? I've heard and read about having coloring book parties that adults are gathering together and actually doing this now face to
yeah,
face.
Well, I think that one of the reasons that people love to color is it kind of harkens back to a nostalgia for the free form creativity you had in childhood. And whether you do it introspectively, quietly, meditatively, or with friends in a more social setting with wine or cheese, I think it just helps you switch off from the stresses of everyday life and clear your head and kind of just get into a really kind of happy space. And one of the major things I think about it is, and this I find in my painting too, is that when you are in a space where there are no rules, there are no right or wrong, that you can use whatever color you choose, whatever materials you want to use. You can use with colored pencils, paints, markers. You can create your own interpretation, your own piece of artwork. So it's your own space, and that's very liberating.
It sounds like the artistic process in a very basic sense for the average person who doesn't partake in it often,
right,
but is longing for that.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, as yourself being an artist, how have you developed your own process, and how do you apply that actually to the work that you do here at Sterling?
Well, I think that just developing my own process is just a matter of doing it for many years, and you kind of just, look at it, you read about it, you look at other art, and just doing it and doing it and doing it. And you kind of, there's a point in that where you learn what I call how to see. And that's something where when I'm working with like young artists, I sometimes tell them, don't look at that, don't look at the picture, look at what you're looking at and learn how to see it. And, you have to see that things are three-dimensional, that a line on someone's face is actually a curve. It's not just a flat thing. And so, but I take all that, and then with the coloring books, I really love to try to pick the most, what I think are beautiful images that people would like to color. And, to kind of, I like to, in my book, start out with kind of easier and then get to more and more complex to kind of take them on a journey, tell a little story with the images.
So the narrative is always underneath.
Yeah, there's some kind of a journey there, yeah.
I think people do love to tell their own stories and are very bottlenecked, I think, in regular life, particularly, as you mentioned, about being so digitally reliant.
Yeah.
Explain to us how, from your perspective of watching this arc of coloring book products and these artists now that are creating these books. I saw on your website you had a whole catalog now of these coloring books. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the different artists that you're working with, and also what you're finding out in their evolution with the products themselves?
Sure. Well, we have a wide range of coloring books, and we also do a lot of ancillary materials such as note cards, journals, and memo pads that are spun off from those books. So our best-selling author is Millie Murata, who's one of the most celebrated illustrators in the United Kingdom, and she's really one of the pioneers in the global coloring movement. Her debut title, Animal Kingdom, was one of the best-selling books of 2015 anywhere. Her illustrations are very intricate, and they're inspired by fascination with the patterns found in nature and wildlife, and her books have amazingly sold over 5 million copies worldwide. We are planning more stuff with Millie. We have her latest book comes out today, Wild Savannah. That'll be followed up this fall with Curious Creatures and even a calendar. And then another of our top authors is Odessa Begay, who hails from Philly. She does beautiful folk art inspired book Little Birds is coming out this May. And then she's doing a very cool Edgar Allan Poe coloring book this September. And then, as I was mentioning before, we also have a number of homegrown titles that we created for Sterling, and we kind of curated these coloring books ourselves here. And then the first in this series was one that I did called Mandala Meditation Coloring Books, and that's been very successful. And we followed that up with various themed books, including one on Celtic artwork, which has also been successful, henna, Mendy designs, and tattoo art.
Are the authors themselves becoming kind of notable where you do a book signing?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Millie has come and done a lot of book signings, and they were extremely popular. Barnes & Noble had a huge coloring day, and people from all over the country came to Barnes & Noble to color, and it was wonderful.
And it seems very encouraging, too, for us in the publishing industry to see expansion in a different way, but yet using a very old
I grew up in the 60s, so I just think, and then that speaks to something else that I was going to say about the future trends, but we do already see the creativity trend expanding in areas like dot to dot and color by numbers. So there's, coloring books that are now color by numbers, and I mean, that was huge in the 60s and 70s. And maybe they're a little more sophisticated now than they were, but I just think that's really kind of, again, a looking back to simplifying what creative time that we have for ourselves, because everyone's days are so jam-packed.
Do you think the coloring book movement or trend is here to stay for a bit for us?
I think it is. I think that it's not going to go away anytime soon because that many people buying coloring books and enjoying them and going back for more, I don't think that's going to stop. And I do think that there are a lot of titles in the marketplace now, so I think that publishers will need to carefully curate their lists and look for new themes and fresh ways of appealing to customers.
So, Barbara, you're trapped on a deserted island. You can only take one book with you. So what book will that be and why?
Well, of the hundreds of books that I've read of many genres, I would have to say The Lord of the Rings. I have probably read this series, well, it's one book, but it was divided into three, 7 times since I first read it in the 1970s. And somehow it always seems fresh. The funny parts always make me laugh. The heroic and tragic parts always make me cry every time. And I'm always amazed at the completeness of the universe Tolkien created.
Are you a fan of the films?
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Could you just complete this sentence? I read because...
I read because, as a nonfiction editor, when I read nonfiction, I read to learn, and because I become obsessed, especially when I'm reading about a subject I'm working on. I really can't read enough about it, whether it's a book on the history of philosophy or maps from the Middle Ages or the Ramones. When I read fiction, I read to learn, to be entertained, and to be transported into other lives and other worlds.
Let's Talk Books is a production of BookExpo America, BEA, the leading book and author event for the North American publishing industry. Join us in Chicago for BEA 2016, May 11th through 13th at McCormick Place. For more information on this episode in BEA, visit bookexpoamerica.com.